Thank you so much for coming to our monthly webinar. Every month we, have a different topic area, and we're very excited this time to talk about our collaboration with Codetta. We've been working with them for probably a year and a half, really collaboratively on, initial developments, but also then bringing a product to life, and that we're talking about today. I'm having Before we jump in, we have this webinar every month. And next month, actually, we're going to have one on design and business. We haven't confirmed the dates yet, but we'll look out for our newsletter. If you happen to like what you see, subscribe to our newsletter. We won't spam your inbox, but once a month, you get an update on activities in the technology design space, and it's always very informative. Let's get started. So I want to introduce Jacques Corriva, who is the CEO of Codetta Bio. He's I would say a seasoned veteran, and has been in this industry for very long. Ultimately, really leading the Codetta team to bring out their first product, which is got introduced. Check what, a month ago, roughly, right?
Yeah, that's right. We launched back in April.
Yep. And, Jacques has a long background in being in the laboratories and life science space, and obviously also started his career as a scientist. And then we have Adrian Arichiga, who's I would say the commercial leader behind Codetta Bio, and also Adrian and Jacques worked together before, so have probably a little bit more history. And I don't want to hear all the secrets, but I'm sure you guys had some fun together in the past. Adrian also comes from a life science background and has worked in a lot of different companies. And then Clotilde Grimaud, our very own head of product. Clotilde has a deep insight in mechanical engineering, data science, and UX strategy, and has led this effort with the Codetta team. So let's get started. I think my first question really is to Jack, is like the science challenge, right? Obviously, laboratory equipment comes in many sizes and in many kind of trajectories, and some are better aligned to the workflows that are happening in labs. Other ones are not as aligned, and that typically is like a hodgepodge of different equipment that people use for different kind of tasks in the lab. Love to hear about the complexity in a modern lab, and how fragmented workflows are really slowing down life science development.
Yeah. So the challenge always is to get as much information out of as small amount of sample material as possible. When you're looking at a cancer biopsy, for example, from a patient, you never want to have to go back to that patient and remove more of that tumor or ask for another sample. You want to take the biopsy and be done with that, and then that sample becomes very precious. You want to be able to get as much information as you can out of it. And so there's this whole area of research right now in medical research that we're calling multiomics, and it's really about looking at DNA and RNA and protein biomarkers, all from that sample, and being able to get as much information as you can. The challenges with doing that is under normal circumstances, it requires multiple different instruments, multiple different workflows, multiple different sets of expertise in order to gather all of that information. And if you do all of those workflows and all of those processes well, you're still left with disparate data sets that you have to figure out a way to normalize and put into a report that you can make sense of. And at Codetta, we wanted to find a better way to tackle this problem. So we wanted to find a way to better deal with the challenges of looking at all of these molecules at the same time, because obviously, the more things you put into a mix, the more complicated an assay becomes. And the other challenge is we wanted to streamline the workflows so that you no longer have to work with multiple different assay setups, multiple different pieces of equipment. There surely should be a way to get all of this done using one technology one assay setup, one instrument, and just streamline the whole thing. The company spent many years, starting at the University of North Carolina, building this workflow and this instrument, and this eventually became Codetta Bio. So what we built is a technology and a workflow that allows us, with a simple 1-hour benchtop hybridization process, we can take a sample, we can split it, and we can set up an assay to detect and bind the targets that the customer wants, whether they're DNA, RNA, and protein, and then repool the sample and run these all together in a true multi-omic format on our microfluidic chip. And so we're able to solve all of these issues of requiring multiple different instruments and multiple different workflows. And we have a real great shot now of taking multi-omics into the diagnostics world and through the FDA as a potential companion diagnostics to help doctors determine whether a patient is a good fit for a drug or not. Of course, in working with Loft, we not only wanted this technology to be cutting edge, but we wanted it to look cool as well, and we wanted it to be functional. And so the great thing with working with you is obviously we work through all of the processes of making sure that the flow and function of the technology was going to be great, and you have to make sure everything's going to work and that the mechanics aren't bumping into each other and these types of things. But then at the end of the day, making sure that it's user friendly and it's an easy workflow for customers. It's easy to train on. When a customer or a researcher walks into the lab, it's the first thing their eye is going to see, and people look at this instrument and think it's beautiful and want to know exactly what this is and learn more about it. And I could not be more thrilled in where we ended up with this project. So.
Thank you.
Maybe a little long-winded there.
No, that was good. And Adrian, I have a question for you, because we know that life science labs are fast-paced and they are really, there's a lot of different workflows. But Codetta is really simplifying a lot of things. The challenge here is people are set in their ways, right? They already have processes, and you as the man that is tasked to kind of tell the world about this new exciting technology. How do you overcome these challenges where people have kind of deeply rooted workflows that they're already doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if we acknowledge the pressure cooker that most of these labs are operating on today, right? Especially right now, those workloads are certainly soaring. The head counts and budgets are pretty tight. And I think there's a realization that data is no longer single omic, right? You have all this genomic, transcriptomic, proteomic, and they're all in a different platform. So, there's actually a welcoming of the technology, with the limited samples. There's limitations that have forced researchers to choose between, an analyte or figure out if they can actually do both a proteomic run as well as analyze nucleic acids. So when we come in and talk to minds that are pretty set on the workflows, now they understand that they don't have to choose between the different analytes. In fact, now they can really extract that really rich multi-omic data from a single sample, which is extremely valuable. So that's really helped and been quite welcome.
You feel that the product market fit is established. It's really more about kind of making connections with the folks that are actually in the market per se to make these upgrades, right, or make these changes in the lab. Clotilde, working with the Codetta team, and I was obviously very involved, but did you feel that how did we achieve such an elegant?
Yeah, you were breaking up a little bit, but I will answer the question. I think I understood.
Okay, sorry.
From a design perspective, I think the opportunity that we were given was to think about the whole user flow from the beginning of pre-instrument to post-instrument, because what we know from lab sciences is that it's not just about the moment you spend with your instrument. It's everything that happens to your sample before it reaches your instrument. Is how do you think about the user to your points, Adrian, about the data they get out of it. How do we make sure that they get what they need out of it and not just what we decided that we will give you? And so I think what was particularly valuable from our engagement was the opportunity to think about the sample preparation and how do we help through the packaging of the consumables, so it's through the experience of the user from when they think about using running a sample through your instrument to the moment where they get the data out of it. And the instrument, in a way, is only one small part in a bigger experience.
Agree. I think, although, I think Jack said this before, like, the more you can simplify a process, the more these really helping folks making faster decisions. I have a question for Jack. When you talk to customers or potential customers, do you see that speed is becoming more of an issue in kind of these workflows? And how is the lab of the future going to change, because we know that we have to deliver drugs faster and we have to make decisions on cells or on samples faster?
Yeah. Speed is always a consideration. It's better, faster, less expensive. It's always the goal here, and it's obviously incredibly expensive to bring new therapeutics to market, and where we're trying to position ourselves is not only helping therapeutics companies and pharmaceutical companies bring those drugs to market and find their targets faster, but also select for the right patients for these trials. And these multi-omic biomarker signatures in a preclinical setting can help these therapeutic companies decide which candidates for these trials might be the best fit. So that it removes some of the random nature to these clinical trials. And if you're selecting for the right patients up front, you have a better chance of a successful clinical trial in later phases and getting through the FDA that much faster. And so the long-term positive impact to these therapeutics and pharmaceutical companies is that their development time and costs for these therapeutics is going to be greatly decreased. And the benefit to the patients is that there's potentially tests that will come along with these drugs that a doctor will be able to prescribe to them, and they'll know up front if a particular therapy will be beneficial to them before they're being prescribed for this.
Yeah, that's terrific. I mean, we work a lot on life science instrumentation, and here it is a lot, right? You can find qualified people for the labs. They work many hours. Whatever you can give them to kind of speed up the workflow, is really greatly welcome. I want to jump into kind of the introduction of the Concerto platform, and maybe Adrian, you can talk a little bit. I think Chuck already touched on it, but when Codetta kind of really started, I would say, its commercial endeavor in bringing this product to life, what was kind of the strategy for kind of like building this platform? Like if I'm in life science and I want to learn from how well you guys have done this, what was the magic sauce that made you guys get to market so fast and also be able to kind of deliver on this promise?
On the Concerto side, so think of Concerto as an all-in-one benchtop omic instrument. So it does the integration of two of the hardest parts of modern molecular analysis. So it's really that target detection of proteins and nucleic acids, which, as we know today, are very different workflows. And then there's the data readout, the analysis. We just spoke about time to market, time to decision, and data readouts is another stumbling point. So now we fold this all into one compact instrument. So we have Concerto, right? It's going to eliminate that need for the multiple instruments, the complexity of the workflows, the disparate data sets that also lead to a lot of headaches when it comes to the actual analysis. So it's really enabling that unified approach to that biomarker validation, which is really was a need in the market itself. And I think, if we kind of go back to, because I think it's a very important point, in addition to the delays, this bottleneck and lack of experts to do the analysis and that data interpretation is really paramount. And with Concerto, our platform is fundamentally different because everything we measure is measured using that same generating mechanism, right? So we don't have, again, different platforms. So there's no more inefficiency. The results are comparable, across multiple omics without all this complicated statistical analysis that needs to happen. Oftentimes also, the experts are just not there. So we're looking at it as a way to really democratize that analysis and allow investigators to focus on what matters, right? So making sure that they're able to really understand the biology instead of really having that headache and nightmare about all this data and what does it actually mean.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, Clotilde, you have a data science background, and I think that was really helpful in the development of the workflows because ultimately, we had to really almost mimic on the UX side what happens in the instrument or then what happens in the data prep, and also, how do you not only, design for the workflow on the instrument, but also for the reagent, workflows and kind of the consumable workflows. Can you talk about that kind of integration of the physical and the kind of like consumable space a little bit with that digital experience?
Yeah, and in a way that to me, the power of design is to hide the complexity of the technology behind the user interface. So the fact that the technology in the background is complicated really doesn't matter to the user. What they want is logic. They want the sample that they've prepped at the beginning to have the right name and kind of patient at the end, right? So sample traceability was a big question at the beginning. We had to think about how do we make it completely seamless to the user that the sample they enter is the data they get, and that has to happen through the sample prep, which is again very complicated and multi-stepped. So for us, as a design kind of partner, the challenge was how do we understand what the user needs to know. Also, another big part of user interface is what are the types of users, their background, their experience, their understanding of what's happening behind the hood, and how do we make it as easy as possible to use the interface, and potentially also based on the staffing challenges to have more people be able to operate the system. So for us, it was all about really understanding the complexity in the background and make it easy for the user. And I think we delivered a really seamless experience also through both via a simplified physical experience and a simplified digital experience wherever possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about this platform also, there's different markets, right? Maybe Adrian, you want to talk a little bit about. There's obviously folks that take cancer cells and make sure that you get the right drugs, but there's also people that are using this to develop the next treatments, right? And these labs work very different, right? Some labs are also more institutional labs that really more like government funded and they're doing pure research. Other ones are really more like, I would say, commercial labs where throughput is probably a little bit different of a focus, and sample traceability is probably more important, right? Yeah, how did you guys kind of segment the market to kind of build the right platform?
So the great thing about the platform and our approach is that it's pretty custom built in terms of the assay, right? So you do have the biomarker validation for the immunology, maybe even also the cell and gene therapy space, or even gene editing. But then you're also going to shift into those labs, institutions, biopharmas who are looking at a very rare, trying to detect something that's extremely rare. So neurological disease is an example of that. Again, the way that the platform was built not only allows us to customize, but it allows that detection, right? Detection levels are going to be quite wide, quite unique, expansive, so that we can have multiple applications. I would say that in addition to that, there is the element or the application of infectious disease, where once again, we're able to detect wide ranges, but able to completely customize to that end user need. So I would say that, the platform is very capable, but it's also the fact that we allow that customized elements where others are not able to accommodate that. We certainly are. This is how we're able to tackle, very different applications, different segments in the market.
Mm-hmm. And I know one part, and I, want to just cover on this. One part of this was also, to be able to make your own sample preps workflows, and really kind of like having this almost open-ended system, right? For kind of, future-proofing any kind of science outcome that you want it to be. Are you planning to kind of, what's your introduction schedule for like these kind of more open-ended engagement with customers?
So from an open-ended, I would say, so we're completely custom, right? So the assays, because we're not a discovery tool, right? We're moving more, once you've done the discovery work, going into more the validation, next steps.
Right.
Everybody's going to have unique needs. So yes, there will be some commonality with some, genes and proteins, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a need that, they have a specific antibody or a specific target. So we incorporate that. So we're already able to do that and accommodate that. We have a discussion with the customers, understand what they're trying to look at, and up to 20 plex, we can build that for them. So again, it's that customization that's available. We can think about in the future just possibly expanding plex, but I would say that currently, since we are looking at more the validation, 20 targets is sufficient.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, Jacques, you mentioned before the beauty of the instrument, and obviously you are in flight to go and see a customer right now. How important is it for folks that are, potential customers that their lab, that it fits in their lab also from a, like, not only like a workflow or usability perspective, but also kind of, this statement, right? Of like, I got a Concerto system. Like it's, I think, Da Vinci, the robotic platform, has done a really good job in, convincing the world that you need to have sexy robots that do surgery. Is this the next sexy robot that's going to live in the lab?
As the CEO of Codetta Bio, I think so. I think it's one of the most important thing. I want researchers to walk into the lab and immediately see this instrument and want to be curious about it and want to know more about it and how they can use it. I think we've definitely accomplished that. It's with the design. It's a beautiful looking machine, and it's what I like to tell people is it's elegantly simple. There's very few moving parts at the end of the day that the customer has to interface with, and they're able to essentially take their sample, load it onto the instrument. There's a few different ancillary reagents and consumables to load, and you hit start and walk away, and at the end you've got your data. To expand on what Adrian was saying as well, a couple of assays that we've built just for sort of proof of concept for customers here, and this is kind of overly simplified, but an example is a cytokine storm panel that we've built. And if you remember back when COVID first came on scene, people were getting very sick because their immune system had not seen the virus before. And so there was kind of an overreaction in many people's immune system. They had to go to the hospital very quickly and be treated. And so, we thought this is a perfect sort of application for a multi-omic diagnostic test where we've created a panel that, in our case, we looked at measuring COVID, RSV, and influenza in a blood sample. So you can imagine a patient walks into the ER, they're sick. From a blood draw, you can determine what virus they have or bacteria. You can tell what the viral load is or the bacterial load in the blood. So how sick are they? and you can tell what their immune system is doing to respond to that drug. So is the immune system responding normally, or is the immune system hyper responding? And this can help give the doctor some guidance on whether you can send this patient home with Tamiflu or another antibiotic, or if you should keep them overnight on an antibiotic trip and monitor them. And again, so this is, grossly oversimplified, but this is the kind of power that these types of multi-omic assays can deliver, even outside of things like cancer research. So, again, we're really excited about the huge areas of medical research and diagnostics that this technology can support.
And if I may add on the importance of design and the physical and the digital, we have this framework, which is like 10 feet away. What do you perceive of the system? And in this case, it'd be the physical design. And in this case, it's a fairly, statement presence on the bench. And then as you move forward, you're like, oh, interesting. What are those design details? How does it work? How does this kind of constitute an ecosystem? And so that's where, the design details matter. And then as we call it, the 1 foot away is when you're actually operating it, whether it's the physical experience or the digital experience of the actual kind of day-to-day user. This is where the user interface comes into play. And so we see so much value in having the opportunity to do all three, the far away, the mid distance, and the close-up experience of digital user experience, so that every user can really find what they need out of the system.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing is, Jacques, working with you on this project, or working with the entire Codetta team, and you guys are, I would say, a scrappy startup, right? You guys don't have billions to spend, and still you had the foresight to really, invest in good design and really, take the extra step. And I'm sure, maybe my question to you, Jacques, is like also, how is that changing the narrative also, not only with customers, but also with investors, right? Because I think, you guys look like a much bigger company just because of the polish of the design, the polish of the UX, kind of the way every aspect of the system is carefully curated, packaging, out of box experiences, things like that. I feel like it's also helping you, really kind of vanguard to your future bigger self, right? In a sense.
Yeah, we're, as a young company, we ask a lot of our customers, we ask a lot of our employees and our investors, and I think we always need to be putting forward our best effort, and so that's in everything we do. Whether it's quality systems, it's the design of our products. We're thinking about user interface all the time, and I think that our philosophy is always to just integrate this thinking and mentality into everything that we're doing in real time, so it doesn't feel like a big lift. If you're doing it all the time in real time, it's just part of your everyday, and I think that's what's gotten us ahead, and it doesn't feel like we're spending huge amounts of our limited resources on these initiatives. We're just constantly baking it in. And it really has paid off. I mean, we hear all the time from our either venture capital investors or our strategic investors how much further ahead we are than the typical companies that they deal with. So, we're doing something right.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, we talk to many life science companies, and I think, they're usually science-led, and scientists sometimes say, duct tape and chewing gum, that's all I need. Why does it need to look good?
Yeah.
But I think it not only helps kind of, make your users more comfortable, it also makes probably your investors more comfortable in projecting, I would say, a more mature image.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said, we weren't, like the duck on the surface of the water, paddling like heck always underneath, but I'm proud of this team. We've done a tremendous job, I think, as a team, and it's one of the things that attracted me to Codetta Bio. I recognized a team here that has been together for quite some time and is willing to move mountains to make this technology and our customers successful. And that's really the secret sauce in a young company. That's really what's needed to be successful. And you need a great product, you need a great team around you, and people that are willing to move mountains.
Yeah, I mean, when I was leading the design effort with our internal studio, and it was really funny because, of course, you always go from like mild to wild, right? So offer a couple different directions, and you guys definitely push the envelope, right? You're like, no, we're gonna go here, like, we're not settling for less, which paid off, right?
yeah. That's us.
Yeah. Adrian, question for you. Obviously, I think where we are, as a platform, it's an open platform. We have, many different potential applications. There is a lot of different things this could do. How do you segment the market? Like, what's your secret sauce in kind of focusing on, like, I would say the success rate of a certain vertical?
So our primary focus is certainly on the biopharma. Again, as I spoke to, looking at biomarker validation. Beyond that, as I said, we have additional segments. So certainly there's some academic research that's more translational, which we're focusing as well. And then there's the big pharma. But I would say that, what's making us successful and what's helping us in the market is really addressing a lot of commonality in pain points. And from the complexity, the perceived complexity right now of having to decide, when you have this sample, whether you're talking about translational research or the early stage biopharma, even the more established biopharma, it's like, how do we get the most out of this, right? How do we get the most insight from the sample? And this is how we are approaching the market. So we're finding those accounts, those labs, those forward thinkers that say, we cannot continue to be overburdened with inefficiencies, trying to have this puzzle of instrumentation to gather the best insight to really understand what we should propel our, forward. So by being able, again, just to come in with a very simple platform that can do so much, it's being widely accepted into the market, into these segments. So this is really our secret sauce, right? That we've listened to those pain points. There's a lot of commonality between those segments. So we're able to offer that solution that gives them the insight to move faster and to really have an impact on the next step of their research, whatever that might be.
Got it. And sales cycles are very long in this industry, right? So obviously, you start talking to somebody, it sometimes might take years before they even have the budget or the space in the lab, or even can make those kind of decisions. And also at the same time, you're constantly evolving your platform, right? You need these, I would say, really smart people that are using it, that actually helps you refine it. The first customers are your most important customers, right? Because they really can shape your roadmap. Eden or Jack, how do you leverage kind of, like, I would call them maybe beta customers or early customers in kind of shaping not only the design but also the overall, like, trajectory of this platform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I go to visit customers, researchers as a whole, even if they're not yet customers, I'm really looking to partner with individuals that see the power of this technology. I'm looking for people that understand that and want to get behind that. They want to jump on board with us and take the ride, because if you can find early customers like that are as excited as we are about this, it makes all the difference. Those types of endorsements of the technology are worth their weight in gold. And so I would rather spend a lot of my time in the field like I'm doing now. I'm sitting, in a parking garage at the airport getting ready to board a plane, and go see people at Stanford University tomorrow to have these discussions. And we want to have these relationships so that we can enable good science, but also have an army of people that are out there endorsing our product and getting other researchers to want to work with this as well. So incredibly important. We're fully supportive of these types of researchers and want to be a full partner with them, not just a customer vendor type of relationship. And it's beginning to pay off. Obviously when you're a new player, we just launched the product in April. It takes some time to build that up and have people know who Codetta Bio is, but we are beginning to get that traction and get our name out, thanks to a lot of the good work from Adrian and his team as well. And I'm completely confident that Codetta Bio is really about to take off and be a game changer on the market here.
Excellent. Yeah. You talked about the team. I'd love to hear more about, like you said, the team was very strong, and it kind of like, I felt the same way when, we've been working together now, almost 2 years, right, on this. I felt like everybody on the team was really committed to, I would say, a shared vision. And it seemed really refreshing that, there was a mutual respect for everybody kind of like working together, I think, in a way, but also having a sense of urgency, which sometimes, it can be hard, right? Because you can develop a platform in the lab and for years and years and never see like a commercial like outcome of it, right? And that's commercialization comes with a unique set of challenges, right? You're not as familiar with the platform. You have to kind of make sure that it delivers very effectively, right? And so you have to kind of constantly pressure test your own platform. And I felt like Codetta's done a really good job in doing that. Do you think it's because they've worked together for a long time? Do you think it's just because they're like science-led first? Like, what was your perception of like this team? Or actually, as a greater question, like, how do we build the perfect science team, right, for building the future of resistance mutations?
I think it starts with the fact that this team's been together for a long time. The technology spun out of the University of North Carolina, Dr. Mike Ramsey's lab. And, Mike's an industry vet. Was a scientific co-founder of a couple other companies as well. And, this technology was developed over the course of almost 10 years at the University of North Carolina. And several of the researchers that worked on developing this there have moved over to Codetta and are still working with us today. And so you have sort of that family culture, family environment, because they've worked together for so long and they put so much of their careers into this technology. And you're absolutely right that for a lot of them, this is their first time turning this into a commercially viable product. It's one thing to have a research tool that is used for engineering purposes and internal purposes, but to get it ready to put in front of customers, it's a whole new set of challenges. And so with me joining the team and bringing in a few other folks that I've worked with in the past, Adrian is one, and others that you've had a chance to meet as well. We've been able to work with the existing team to work with partners and teach them different things that have to happen in order to get a product ready to put in front of customers and really professionalize that product, make sure it works the same way every time, and is going to give reproducible results to customers. It's so important as a young company. You just can't have products that are put out in the field that aren't going to work reproducibly consistently every time. And so it takes time, but we're disciplined. We've got a very committed team, like I said, that was willing to move mountains. And so we were able to move very fast. We were able to raise money from venture capital world in order to do this as well, and to great success. We took the product from alpha stage to commercial launch in about 18 months. which is sort of record speed in this environment we're in right now as well, where there's a lot of companies that are struggling. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's always iterating that has to happen. But then I think it's in terms of keeping the culture strong the way it is. We're very careful about who we hire into the organization. We want to make sure that new people that we hire in have that same fire in their belly and understand the culture, the historical culture within the company, and how everybody feels about this product and the goals we've set for ourselves and wants to be a part of that. It's if you don't pay attention to those little things, it can very quickly change the culture, and we don't want that to happen. We want to hold on to that as long as we can because we feel like that's part of our success.
Makes sense. Yep. I would say it's also comes with the maturity, right? I feel like the Codetta bio team is very mature. I would say intellectually, also in understanding what it needs to do to kind of make a product successful. Especially I think when we worked on kind of the UX hardware integration, there was a lot of kind of workflow back and forth where it was really valuable to kind of talk to folks that have done it for 10 years and can say, no, this didn't work because X, Y, Z, or no, we have to do this, or here's how we do the sample prep. And then, the same people then also getting super excited about kind of the design we gave them, right? Where they say, oh my God, now actually this is elegant, we can use this, we can really streamline all these workflows in a way that makes it a faster, more efficient kind of experience, right? I think we have another 15 minutes of a couple more questions, maybe some answers from the audience. But
sure.
One thing I'd love to hear from you guys is also your roadmap, right? Obviously, I think we made some cautious decisions on this first product to, not include a touch screen, have a PC on the side, because, at that point it was like, okay, we want to get the core of the product right. But, ultimately, obviously, there might be a whole array of products that actually could spin out of this, like, basically system. We know that, there is probably also a tiered offering that could happen, right? Ultimately. But how do you guys think already of that roadmap? And, where do you want to take kind of the next steps from a development perspective?
Yeah. Adrian, you wanna take a stab at this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's since we've launched a couple of months ago, it's interesting to think about the future. And then right now, to an earlier point in question is, how have the initial interactions and early customers really shaped the future? I do have to say that for now, it's been positive, correct? So, all the feedback has been great. So, we don't have necessarily a list of things we want to immediately change. I would say what we do where there is interest. So, obviously we're a research use only instrument. As we speak to other partners who are more in the diagnostic space, it's probably the roadmap is certainly one that will look into that level of instrument in the future, right? So, of course, we're collecting more insights and we'll have to work with the right partners, but I believe that's certainly something in the future. In terms of changing the UX on the instrument, again, we're still collecting data, but certainly there might be a version that also allows us to maybe increase plex. We'll be able to segment to not only on that translational space, as we move into more diagnostic, but maybe we also want to explore additional applications where we might want to up the plex, which is certainly a possibility with the technology itself, right? So I would say right now we're riding the high of all the positive feedback coming in, but I think in the background is certainly how do we get that to the next level and more into the DX space.
Right. I mean, total sense. I mean, that is definitely like a natural trajectory, right? Obviously, because it's large market with lots of needs. And I think also as a company, it's always good to be in more than one vertical, right? Because you're really more diversified and more resilient probably in certain aspects.
Mm-hmm.
I would say a question for Clotilde. I think, and I know this answer, but what did we do to make sure that it's future-proof, whatever we're building?
Yeah, so I think one big element was around the physical design is to kind of think about every scenario that we could imagine. And while we kind of optimized for, the simple, we also offered, and I know you have a couple chips inside your system. So how can we think about, different use cases, different, like user needs of, hey, I won't have a small set of samples to run, I have a large set of samples to run. So thinking about everything from the beginning, again, physical and digital together. So scenario planning, and then in terms of digital design, we delivered a design system. And so in a way, we have kind of an expandable menu of options, and then kind of like, how do we kind of set you all up for your future roadmap with, a color scheme, a kind of design system that is really cohesive with your brand and will work throughout the ages. I think on the UX side, we were a little bit less on the wild side for good reasons, right? The UX really needs to be simple, easy to use, and not be in the way. And so I think we delivered kind of the noticeable 10-foot view, but also the very simplified experience. And I think that's how we set up Codetta for future success.
Mm-hmm. I think one other thing that struck with me is, Jack, remember that meeting when we all were in North Carolina, and we had to make kind of fundamental decisions on the beta unit about sizes and how many samples do we allow? And I felt that it was very kind of pragmatic decisions led to kind of where we are now as a platform, but it was also driven by not only do we want to we want to make it as simple for the user to get things that they need for their workflows, but also, we didn't want to overcomplicate, the consumables in a way, right? So I feel like it's not only that you want to make it simple, you also want to make it accessible for labs to restock and to kind of like get things that they need. And I felt that was a good decision ultimately, which ultimately driving obviously size and other implications, but it probably was definitely the right decision at that point to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some consumables that we're obviously not making every consumable that goes into the product. We're buying these from other vendors as well, and there's some situations where our customers can buy from those same vendors, and so it just makes sense that in situations where it's more convenient for them to buy through us in a kit format, great. We'll offer that. If they have special considerations with some of these other vendors and it's easier to buy direct, then they should be able to do that as well. And again, we just want to make it as easy as possible to do business with us and get the best data that you can, rather than trying to paint customers into a corner and locking them into just buying from Codetta. So we're more interested in the white glove treatment and making sure that they have the instrument, they have the assays from us, and are getting the best data they can.
And if I may add about kind of how your team operates, and going back to the same experience, like from a partner perspective, it seems I really appreciated how the science team and the business team really collaborated as on equal footing, having kind of the respect to listen to each other's priorities and say, okay, yeah, it's a little bit less good for the science, but better for the business, or vice versa. So that mutual respect between the two kind of backgrounds, I think, was really special in your team. And I'm fully with you, Jack, that the team you are, leading is really powerful in its motivation, and I think it reflects very well on your company's culture.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. In my experience, those tensions tend to happen after you launch the product. So we'll just have to be careful and monitor this and make sure they continue to stay close.
But I think, we work with many life science companies, and, it was very refreshing to work with your team because many times people underestimate the challenges of hardware and also underestimate the challenges of making, custom consumables, right? And I think, because you can make it in onesies and twosies doesn't mean you can make it in millions and scale at the right cost, right? So it can really change your it can really damage your business model in a way if you make the wrong decision there, right? And I feel like companies sometimes, see maybe how bigger companies are doing it and say, well, we can, spin up, well played, or we can, whatever we need to do, we can build that. But I think it's kind of with a business maturity to understand, no, this is what we want to build. This is what we don't want to build. We want to kind of not spin our wheels on things that can be purchased or can be got somewhere else, right? So I think it's a big maturity. I think, yeah, as Clotilde said, having the right business mindset, but also the right science mindset together is really what sets you guys apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, in this, it's a little tougher times right now in the life science world, and just good basic business fundamentals goes a long way right now. And it's the same basic business fundamentals of whether you're in a retail business or manufacturing or a life science business like us. It's just making sure you're careful with your prioritization and where you're deploying your resources, whether it's people or your cash, and making good decisions based on that.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And I think, it's interesting, right? Maybe it's a question for you. The life science space for so long, I would say, was, maybe overfunded. I don't know if it's true, but it was easy to basically have, if you had a good idea, it was easy to, or was easier to get funding and put something out there. And many of these products are not necessarily solving customers' issues, right? And I feel like now VCs might be a little bit more gung-ho in investing. And I mean, it's great that you guys get funding. It's great that you guys are a record time to market. You guys are like a leading example. But I'm sure you get asked all the time by other founders, like, what should I do? Maybe you can do the startup boot camp. Give us 2 minutes, like what to focus on when you're building a life science company.
Yeah, maybe that'll be my next gig after retirement. It's between that and handing shopping carts at Home Depot, so it's one or the other. So, yeah, no, but that would be that would be great. It's Codetta is not my first startup. I was an early employee at NanoString Technologies as well, and that company did well. But every young company, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. It's ups and downs, and like I said earlier, small companies have a lot of the same challenges as billion-dollar companies, and you just have to make your way and have a calm, clear head, and make sure you're prioritizing what has to happen and managing your resources properly. And you take it in bite-sized chunks, and it works its way. So there's no real magic to it. You just have to be real careful.
Right. I mean, but burn rate, cash positive and burn rate are two things that drive companies, right? So
That's right. Yeah.
So the moment you sell more than you actually burn, the better it gets for everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, why I ride airplanes like people take the bus.
Right. Yeah, and I think what's unique also is in your space, it's not only the equipment purchase, right? It's also the consumable purchase that makes a big impact, right? And that's also makes it harder sometimes for adoptions, right? Because I think labs are pretty conscious of putting another platform in where they have to get some consumables, and many labs have equipment that they don't use just because it's not really part of their core workflow any longer. And so it's a real challenge to kind of it's more revenue for the company if you are in a lab, but at the same time the entry is higher, right? The challenges for entry are a little higher than in just a durable or just a consumable space.
Yeah. And I think we put quite a bit of thought into this as well. And the core of our technology, although we've invented a novel workflow and we have a novel piece of instrumentation for multiomics, the core of the technology is still based on PCR, right? And so for anybody that's on this meeting, everybody learned about PCR during COVID, and PCR is a method that's been around for 40 years, and so it's something that's very understood and accepted in the life science research world. And so it's not like we're coming to them with a technique that they have to wrap their head around and get comfortable with. They're already comfortable with it. And so we're simply taking a technology that they already understand and enabling them with more capabilities around it. And then we've tried to be as flexible as we can around pricing and lowering those barriers to entry to get access to the instruments. So, of course, they can buy one outright, but we have flexible leasing options where they can have it for a few months for specific projects and buy it outright if they want, or they can send it back and we'll just move it somewhere else. And then we also have reagent rental options too, where maybe they don't have capital budget to buy equipment, but they have lots of budget for projects. And so they can spend money for the consumables and we'll roll the amortization costs of the instrument into that pricing for them. So, our goal is just to get the instrument out there and into people's hands so they can see the power of this and have their research benefit from it.
Makes total sense. Yeah. And we have about 3 minutes late. So sorry, I have anybody in the audience, if they have any questions, please put it in the chat. But I think we're just going to have a last round of conversations before we send Jack to fly to San Francisco. I don't think any questions are coming in. So Clotilde, do you have any questions for our audience?
Oh.
Or for our panelists?
Yeah, Jacques, for your next startup, what will you do differently? Or, I mean, not necessarily startup, but life science company.
Yeah. I think, I've worked at big companies. I've worked at AstraZeneca and Roche Diagnostics, and I really love startup companies. So I think the next one I do will probably be a really early company. Likely something that is spun out of an academic institution as a technology that needs to be formed into a company and go from there. So, really early. NanoString was a couple of years into being a company. I joined Codetta after being a company for about 2 years. And so, this would be sort of a step back in forming a company, but, a little bit different challenge, but just as exciting.
As front-end innovation people, we kind of love these thorny challenges of like, how do we detangle this knot of questions? So
yep. Well, it was really a pleasure working with you, and I see Bud on the call. Hi, Bud.
Hi, Bud.
And congratulations on the launch. Jacques and Adrian, thanks for being with us on the webinar. Good luck. And see you next time. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.